Hi everyone, it's Kelly from the Hub, here today to talk to you about all things addiction and trauma and all the stuff that we're talking about. Our friend Sharon is here from the WellSpan Wellness Center. How are you there, friend?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing very well. So I was looking at our topic list, which all of you know is right there up on my bulletin board. And the topic today that Sharon wanted to talk about is stigma. So I understand what stigma is, but I'm not sure how all of this stuff connects together. So Sharon, I will let you do the honors.
Wonderful. I'll lead you down the road.
Excellent. Looking forward to it.
There's a lot of stigma around the language that we use, especially related to people who have addictions. For example, if a diabetic gets blood work done and their blood sugars are high, we don't call it a hot sugar. But if someone with an addiction has high levels, we call it hot. Hot urine, hot blood work.
Oh.
So when we really understand addiction is a disease of the brain, the language that we use around other diseases isn't the same language we use around addiction. So it's a hot urine, or they're not clean.
Oh, right.
What does that mean? They didn't take a shower last night? Like, yeah, you know?
Yeah, you know what? I never thought about it. You're right, because people say, right, this isn't a clean sample. I've absolutely heard people say it's right.
Yeah. If somebody has high blood pressure, they don't say they don't have clean high blood pressure.
Right.
And that's very stigmatizing language.
Yeah.
So, and one of the other pieces of language is maybe not exactly stigma, but how many times have you heard people say, I bet you're right? The language around gambling is incorporated into our culture. I'll bet you on that one. That's language related to gambling addiction.
I've never even thought about that before.
So when we use language that's off-putting or part of our culture, it's harder to see, oh, that person has a gambling addiction, but it's so embedded, the language of gambling addiction is embedded into our culture. So it's easier to be in denial about that addiction. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm really processing that because I never thought about that before. And so then you're thinking, oh, how many times have you said something that you didn't even realize could have been a thing?
Yep.
Well, and I mean, and truly, I think that social drinking is also very embedded in our culture. Like, you know, you don't have New Year's Eve unless you have champagne, so you would just have champagne or whatever, a drink to toast someone with. Every special occasion involves toasting someone, and you don't toast with water because, I mean, it's all those, it's that stuff that, right, that's so embedded into your culture that you don't even, it doesn't even cross your mind. Because it's not like, I mean, I'm not making light of this and I'm not making fun, but it's not like you don't have, you know, like you don't have like a line of cocaine and say cheers and everybody has a line of cocaine. Like I'm not trying to make, you know, like make fun of that or whatever, but like that's not part of our culture. Although there are probably some people who are like, well, that is part of my culture. Like that is what happens. And so I'm not trying to make light of that, but right.
And what's considered almost a rite of passage in our culture? Most cultures have a rite of passage into adolescence or adulthood or into, you know, depending on the culture, manhood, womanhood.
Yeah.
But for us here, what's our rite of passage is getting drunk.
Right. It's like, what was amongst my peers, I could say, what was the first drink that you had when you were 21? And everybody would be like, I had drinks before I was 21. Like, and that's, you know.
And
That's,
think about that. Think about that. One of the rites of passage is getting your driver's license.
yep.
So you start drinking and get your driver's license at the same time. We don't think about that. That's probably not a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when we look at all the things related to addiction and stigma, we have a long way to go in changing our language. And I don't mean to get like radical and you can't say this or that,
Yeah.
but just be aware. Be aware when somebody says they have a hot urine, say, what does that mean? Does
Yeah.
that mean it's like where it's supposed to be or not? So negative, positive. If you have tests done, medical tests done, and they come back and it's good news, then those results are negative.
Right.
But we don't say that with addiction.
Right.
They come back and their urine doesn't have any traces of drugs in it. We don't say that was a negative urine.
Right.
It was a clean urine. And
Even, even to say that, some people, we just call people alcoholics.
Mm-hmm.
And throw around a clinical word that's as if it was part of everyday jargon.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mean, it's what's interesting is that, now part of our vernacular is you say substance use disorder.
Mm-hmm.
But that took, for a lot of people, and a lot of people still, that took or takes a long time to change those words so that you're not constantly putting people into that funky place.
And think about that. Now we say a person who has substance use disorder. That's a lot more words than a person who's an addict, a person,
right.
Or even an addict,
an
alcoholic.
Right.
So now we're taking one word and stretching it out to 6,
right,
or 7. I never counted them, but
yeah,
but yeah. And when we talk about mental illness, there's a lot of stigma around that. I would guess that half of the people that we know and interact with are taking an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety medication, and we don't talk about that.
right.
Because we have this stigma that, ooh, there's something wrong with you because you have that.
Right.
But we'll talk about our heart disease, we'll talk about our high blood pressure, but we don't talk about our mental illness.
Right, because it's the thing like, I know that because you have heart disease, you're not going to attack me. But I don't know if you have a mental illness, if you're going to all of a sudden be violent. And that's also the stereotype of, and even just to say mental illness, like, hey now.
Right.
Everybody thinks, like, a insane asylum, padded room, locked up, drugged out, and all those, like,
irresponsible.
Right.
That's all the stigma that's related to the term mental illness.
Right.
So,
and, yeah,
we really need to be more sensitive about it and how that's related to trauma. Are you with me here, honey? We're going down the path. Am I connecting the dots for you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because if the language that is always used is negative, then if you're trying to get better, it's harder. And if you've had stuff that's happened to you with negative language, it's hard to get over that stuff, and it's hard to change the way it is in your brain.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because people aren't bad trying to get good. They're sick trying to get well.
Right.
And the language we use, the stigma is around bad trying to get good. Yeah. So that's off-putting for people in recovery. They don't want to be shamed. And that's what stigma does. It shames people. And shame, as we talked about before, is a very toxic emotion. So people want to resist the toxic emotion And then we label them as resistant to treatment or resistant to recovery. You know, we're really
Then it makes it circle over and over and over and over and over again.
Exactly. So then when you add in the whole piece about adverse childhood experiences, we don't want to talk about that, even though at least 67% of the population has had some adverse childhood experiences. So that is more than half. But most people do not talk about it because there's shame. So we want to stuff it, pretend it didn't happen, deny it. And if we're stuffing it, pretending it didn't happen and denying it, we're not getting into any kind of recovery over those wounds from childhood. Stigma keeps us from going through the door of a counselor's office or the door of a physician's office where we have to be honest with them about why our blood pressure is so high and about the stress in our life. And not that high blood pressure is only related to stress.
Right.
It's definitely related to stress.
Right.
There's a lot of other causes. There's genetic reasons, there's dietary reasons. I mean, all of that.
Right.
But what I'm saying, it prevents patients from being totally honest with their doctor.
Right.
And that lack of honesty could be a huge contributing factor to their wellness plan. But if the doctor doesn't know about it, they can't incorporate. Just go with that example of somebody under a lot of stress. The doctor doesn't know, they can't recommend stress reduction.
Right. So it's not like you're not being honest. You're just not talking about the whole thing because you pretty much feel like you can't.
Exactly. Because of the stigma, which causes the shame. So we hide shame. So that means we don't talk about what's really bothering us.
Right. And this is, and I mean, let's just lay it out. There are people who don't want to tell their doctor because they are concerned with how their doctor might react. It's not, it's no profession is immune to, learning, to not learning and to not growing and to all that stuff. So there could be a physician that you see for your heart that you're uncomfortable saying, I feel like I got a lot of stuff and I got to talk about this with you because I feel like it's a problem. They might say, well, suck it up.
Yep. Now, and some doctors, my doctor personally is amazing.
Yeah.
I saw him shortly after my mother died and, told him that I was really stressed out. My mother, he sat there and talked to me. I mean, it was amazing. He is just amazing. So there are a lot of healthcare providers. However, that's one of the things with trauma-informed care. Trauma-informed care teaches people how to be more like my doctor on a regular basis, that it's the norm. Not, oh, well, I have to be like sympathetic right now. Let's put that. No, it comes from within.
Right.
And when you have that, you can blurt things out. People often say that. I can't believe I blurted it out. Well, because it was ready to come.
Right.
You don't blurt if it's not at the surface.
Right.
But then what do we have to do to keep things from coming out? Eat, drink alcohol, use drugs.
Right, to keep pushing it down.
So stigma feeds addiction. Stigma feeds mental illness. So the more we can deal with stigma and be careful about our language, the more we're coming from a trauma-informed approach that hopefully will develop trust and connection for people who need trust and connection. It's a big deal. People have been, we talk about, we've gotten much better. I know, like when here at the Wellness Center, when we had our bariatric program was just opening, we all had to go through sensitivity training for people who have real problems with obesity. So this is what I'm talking about. The stigma that's so embedded in our culture, we don't even think about what we're saying. Just like I said, you know, that I'll bet you on that one. Who stops to think that's gambling addiction language?
Right. Right.
And
we're not kind to people who are overweight. Right.
Exactly.
Right. And you know, it doesn't matter if we can think of them now or not. There are a million things that you say about those kinds of things. Right.
So there's a lot of stigma around that. And there is some stigma that is easier to address. The stigma around people who are different from us in any way is also difficult.
Yeah.
So our language, words do hurt.
Yeah.
You know, that old saying, sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you.
Yeah, not true at all.
No, not true at all. So we just need to be a little more sensitive to the people we're talking with and interacting with, and be a little more sensitive about our own language.
Yeah.
And drug addicts are losers.
Right.
But an alcoholic has a problem with drinking.
Right. Right.
So
right.
it depends on the drug, some of the language that's used.
Yeah.
And some of the belief systems.
Yeah.
If an alcoholic walks in a room, a person who is addicted to alcohol, if a person who's addicted to alcohol walks in your room, you don't hide your purse. But if a person walks in the room that has an opiate addiction, you're probably going to hide your purse. Again, because we see people not as people. We see them as the addict. What's the belief system around that?
Right.
And that's different than the person who has a problem with alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
In some of my work that I do an exercise to tease that out. And the person with the alcohol issue is always older. The person with opiate addiction is always younger. You get into gender.
Wow.
And you look at the belief systems that we have.
Right.
So when somebody is an opiate addict, and we will say, can't believe he's 55 years old. Well, why not?
Right.
Do you have to be 55 to have high blood pressure? Do you have to be 55 to have diabetes?
Right. 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 Right.
Is that unbelievable?
Yeah.
So language is important. The other thing about language, we know that addiction is a chronic relapsing disease, and a lot of people get fed up. Oh, well, here they come again. We just had them last week, and here they are again. They relapsed again. But if you look at the research, the relapse rate for people with high blood pressure is higher. Relapse rate for diabetes is higher. Now, when somebody...
Right, and no one says, there is not a person in the room who's like, oh, look at you with your high blood pressure.
Exactly.
Has attitude about that. Ugh, can't keep.
Can you imagine somebody going into the ER and their blood sugars are 500, and the attending would say, "You were just here last week and they were 500." Well, what's wrong with you?
Can't you get yourself together? Right. That never happens. Right.
You must have done something wrong. You must have ate something wrong. You must have forgot your medication, not taken your insulin. We don't do that.
Right.
But we do that with people who have substance use disorder. Yes. Right. And we do that with people with mental illness, especially certain mental illnesses that need medication to stabilize them. And they don't like to take it because it makes them feel yucky. So they'll stop taking it, and we chastise them for that. So.
Sorry, my dog's barking right now. I'm trying to. Someone just rang the doorbell. This is a perfect spot to end. So while my dog is barking in the background, I will say goodbye and we will chat again next time.
All
Thank
right,
you
take
very
care.
much. See
See
you.
ya. Bye-bye.